first person is an untitled.
One there. What, starting now? We started
Sorry, feel free to move it.
No, I'll just leave it there so it doesn't fall off.
Okay, we'll just do
Good morning.
So we're going to record this.
You Andy, are you?
Yep,
Yeah.
I think they're already
You're all right.
recording because we start at 8:30 is the first week.
Great. Hi, how are you? Very good, thanks. Good to see you. Very good.
Okay, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to the hearings meeting of the Carterton District Council for our long-term plan. Just first like to acknowledge everyone's in the public gallery already this morning, and those at the media table. Yeah, and everyone else who will be watching this virtually later on. So welcome. And I'd just like to acknowledge everyone in our community as well that's been involved with the pre-engagement, the consultation, and also the process of verbally submitting over the next 2 days. And also, just before we get into it, also acknowledge councillors, the work that you've put into this with the pre-engagement and the consultation and all the work in getting to where we are, and also the work of the management and staff as well. I know the 10-year plan is huge and it just gets more and more work, so just acknowledgement there. So I'd like to start with the karakia. Rob, are you able to start with the karakia, please?
Me ino tātou. Mai te pai maunga raro ki te tai, mai te awatonga raro ki te awaraki. Tēnei te hapori awhi ai e taratahi, whano haramai te toki, hauie huie tai ki.
You're all right. Okay. So do we have any apologies?
Jill perhaps for that?
Yeah. Okay. So can someone move apologies, Jill, for lateness? Move and seconder? Second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So conflicts of interest declaration. It's important that we declare these, but also as we get into the proceedings, you might become aware that you do have a conflict that you don't realise now, so you can identify it then as well. But right from this point now, are there any conflicts of interest?
Yes, I have on 6 of the remit, 6 of the submissions that pertain to Eastern Growth submission, as I'm a landowner in that area. Do you want me to read them out? I can read them out if you like. So there's 6 different submissions, but I won't speak to or ask questions on it pertaining to Eastern Growth.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
I've had 2 family members submit that neither are speaking, and these were just basic submissions.
Okay, thank you. Any other conflicts?
No. I know a number of the respondents, but no conflicts with them, nothing that's not shared in common.
Okay. Sure, Jill. We're just doing the conflicts of interest. Do you have a conflict of interest?
I think so.
No. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we note those conflicts of interest. So now we moved on to the report, item number 4 on the agenda. I'll hand it over to Joan.
Oh, okay, so do you want me to just look through the summary? You want me to do it now?
Yes, yeah. I'd like to get a stage where we remove the first 2 recommendations.
Yeah, okay. So I think I'll probably really take what's written as read. It's really pretty much a high-level summary of the feedback that we have received. So in your deliberations, which is probably going to happen tomorrow, what you'll need to do is just sort of take in the general feedback, consider the individual submission points as well. But because submissions are what they are, it's not a poll of the community. People who choose to engage through submissions choose to do so. There's a big silent majority out there. The combination of the conversations that you had when you went out to engage directly with the community, the submissions, and the electronic feedback that we got through the social media, that should all just go into informing your judgment on what you want, any changes that you want to the draft community plan, and particularly where you settle on those 3 consultation items.
Okay.
So weight them according to your own judgment, I guess is my advice to you. But, you know, people who have chosen to submit have put time into their submissions. There's pretty good submissions this time around in terms of very thoughtful submissions. So give yourselves plenty of time to sort of think about the measures that the submitters raise. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Any discussion? No? Okay.
And you'll get a chance to go back over this.
That's right. So what I'd like to do is move the first 2 recommendations of the report, which number 1 is we receive the report, and number 2 we hear submitters.
I'll move that.
Move that. And the seconder? Rebecca? All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried, thank you. And we'll revisit the other recommendations at the end. So just how it's going to run today is at 8:45 we'll start hearing the submissions. And Rebecca and I met yesterday and just worked out how a good way to make sure it happens smoothly and we utilise the time the best. So as you know, we're breaking into, we'll have 3 2-hour sessions, and submitters will have up to 10 minutes, and we're encouraged over those 10 minutes to allow at least 2 minutes for questions. So we'll need to stick to 10 minutes so we can get through. But in the past I think it's been up to 5 minutes, so 10 minutes is quite good. And at the end of all, we've heard all the verbal submitters, we will systematically work through the written submissions. And we'll start this earlier if we have any gaps in the verbal submissions, so just we're utilising the time. And as we work through the submissions, and Rebecca might want to talk to this a bit more, we'll just identify some actions that maybe not related to the long-term plan, but as an action list, and also what points we want to be part of the deliberations. But do you want to add into that, Rebecca?
Yeah, Greg and I were trying to think of the most orderly fashion to go through each of the submissions, like giving due justice to each of them. So what we thought we'd do is today we're just hearing submissions and going over submissions. So like Greg said, when we have gaps and we go through submissions, if we could identify 2 things out of the submissions. One is anything that needs to be discussed further and a decision made on, and the second one, things that don't necessarily relate to the LTP, like such as district planning or eastern growth, and we can park them on the action list to identify and go through later. So that'd be the two things. And then tomorrow, when we're doing deliberations, we'll go through our deliberations list and make sure we've discussed each of the items that have been brought up. Yeah, but open to any adjustments along the way as well as we go.
you'll see in the report that the consultation key issues, there's a summary of those in there, so we've got that in there, so we know where those are sitting, but there's plenty of and just one further thing, just to confirm that that we, as elected members, we represent the whole community, so we just need to have that perspective when we deliberate. But we might as well get straight into verbal submissions if everyone's good. Yeah, Michelle is an apology. She is not going to be able to make it. So the next one is you, Andy. So I'd like to welcome you. And
thanks.
Yep. Thank you very much for submitting, and we do really appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing what you say. So as you heard, you've got about 10 minutes, and you can leave some time for questions. That would be great.
I'll let you know when it's 8 minutes, and then the bell will go at 10.
Well, I'll try and keep it short and snappy. You guys probably got a lot of people to see, and I'm not going to do much more except reiterate what I've already submitted. So very brief snapshot of me. I've been living in Carterton about 20 years. I've worked locally for most of that time. I guess reading the consultation document, it's great that we have a consultation document, and I'll just take note of what Greg said earlier about the tremendous amount of work which council puts into documents like that and the long-term plan. And I'm not overly familiar with local government because I see it as kind of bland entities which sends me invoices for increasing amounts of money. Which leads me directly onto the subject of rates, which is pretty much a hot topic here, and I'm possibly one of the least vociferous people when it comes to haranguing the council about the level of rates. By being here 20 years, my rates have quadrupled. They've gone from around $1,200 to around $4,800 for a very modest cottage, which is almost a tiny home by today's standards. I think it's about 150 square metres and a couple of very modest paddocks. The direct benefits I've received from that increase in my rate, I think, is a recycling bin and some bags for dog poop on the local park. I'm aware there has been an upgrade in local amenities in terms of this structure here and the library and all that, which is good, although I'm aware that civic centre here is still a contentious subject from contention locally. So getting back to the consultation document, I think it's I've been aware you've got a legal, is a 2002 Local Government Act where you've got to consult with the community, so you don't really have a choice on that. But it left me feeling a bit disappointed. There's a wealth of information in it which takes a significant amount of time to sit down and try and digest, and I've skimmed through it along with a couple of other people. But I did, having finished reading it, I did feel somewhat patronised and condescended to. I think the backdrop to our current environment is informed by, to me, 3 key areas. We've got the current global pandemic, which we can't foresee the downstream consequences of that. And I think we've been quite fortunate in New Zealand to escape the worst of it, but who knows what's going to happen. I think climate change is going to be an ongoing issue, and that's going to have a larger and larger profile in our day-to-day lives. And I think there's another one which is kind of going under the radar. There's a bit of a health pandemic, a very quiet health pandemic in New Zealand at the moment, with the rate of obesity. And I say that from a background of a clinician and having worked in clinical services for the past 30 plus years. I think New Zealand's number 3 in the OECD table for rates of obesity, maybe 1 in 3 adults in New Zealand. So, while they don't seem directly connected to our long-term plan locally, I think the long-term plan, and I noticed in the long-term plan you have alluded and made reference to a lot of that, but I don't really see it being translated into direct action And getting back to my submission, I think what you put out for consultation, those 3 points, car parks and cycleways and upgrading the town centre. I mean, I think car parks, it's, I'm not saying it's laughable, but cars are sinking under the weight of motor traffic. You know, you can't really cycle down the high street because you've got cars parked on either side, you've got dairy trucks, you've got logging trucks, your business knows what, you kind of take your life in your hands crossing the road some days. So for the for the council to be advocating for even more car parks within the town, I think really it's counterintuitive. And I know a lot of I've transitioned from being a healthcare professional to owning my own business locally. And I know a lot of small businesses say, well, we want, local car parking because it encourages foot traffic into our businesses, blah, blah, blah. But if you actually research that topic, and there's a plethora of international research on the design of town centres and car parking and all manner of stuff around that, there's no real correlation between car parking locally and foot traffic into local businesses. And I feel maybe it's an opportunity for local council to re-look at the town centre, which I'm aware you are planning on doing, and maybe coming up with something different and something innovative and something which isn't the same old, same old. I mean, this is a horribly mangled saying, but if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And really, if you just keep putting in car parks and looking at it from a traditional perspective, we're just going to get more and more traffic in town. And it's not an attractive high street to walk up and down because of the traffic. Now, I don't find it attractive to walk up and down with lorries thundering past. And I think we've got 2 pedestrian crossings, 3 maybe, I don't know. But really, it's not very satisfactory, I don't feel. And also, I kind of feel saying that if we borrow 900k to put in a new works yard for ourselves somewhere else, and then we can have that land for car parking, it's kind of really pushing your own agenda and not being informed by what. I think Jane Davis alluded to something just before about the silent majority, and that seems to be a case in point where you've got a few vocal people maybe advocating for a particular thing, but maybe they're not representative of the wider community. But anyway, I think it's bang on about car parks in the 21st century, not even car parks with EV charging points. It's not a good look. Cycleways, well, a particular point of interest to me. I've been to numerous meetings on progression of cycling infrastructure in the Wairarapa. Really, they're just talk fests from my perspective. I think the most significant piece of cycling infrastructure recently is the bike park up at the local railway station where you can put your bike and they've got a racking system if you're travelling on the train, which is poor really. I mean, a lot of people come to the Wairarapa to cycle, and yet there's very little facility for cycling over here. And it's a wide open area. We've got lots of really nice, quiet-ish roads, which could be really good for promoting cycling locally. And if you look to other areas, I mean, towns as diverse as Reefton. I went to Reefton a few years ago and haven't visited.
Minutes.
Yeah. Excuse me, Andy, are you all right if we ask questions now? Yes, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I wasn't going to talk that much, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Thank you. So, any questions?
Did you have sorry.
I was going to ask you, did you actually, I don't know whether I read it, did you actually choose what you wanted in those 3 areas of that we're consulting on? I don't know if I saw that. No orders, I believe.
Did I choose?
Did you actually choose the, in the, say, the 5 Towns Trail?
Did I choose what, sorry?
Choose the option that you wanted for the 5 Towns Trail.
No, I put something entirely different. I thought maybe you could look at alternative ways of promoting cycling. for example, reducing speed limits in local roads. And I know in the UK, they've got things called quiet roads or quiet lanes, which are kind of set aside for cycling and for walking. And those are the activities promoted on those bits of road where rather than just having, you know, the maximum speed limit and people charging it down on them. So no, I didn't choose that. I think there's viable alternatives. I didn't choose it because it's been talked about for the past 2 decades at least, and really there's not been any concrete progress.
Thank you. Rebecca, good question.
Oh, I was just going to ask, did you have specific roads in mind about reducing the speed? I'm on the speed review committee at the moment. We're looking at the roads along with Russell and along South Wairarapa District Council, so I'm interested if you have particular roads.
Yeah, well, again, promoting my own self-interest, the roads I use mostly are heading out of town, Park Road. It's not that cycle friendly at the moment unless they finish the road works down there. Belvedere, Upper Belvedere, the sort of the road from here in Matarara, those are the roads which a lot of people know. There's over the last year or two, there's been a lot of new cycle groups formed, and people of a certain demographic purchasing e-bikes, and I see them charging all around the countryside between here in Matarara and here in Gladstone. A lot of those local, non kind of, you know, some roads, some of the secondary roads you can describe as arterial, people using to get from A to B. Well, there's a lot of roads which are just access roads, and in Belvedere Road, as an example, you head down towards Sparks Park and there's a 70 limit, but stuff like that can be pushed right out into the countryside, so people can enjoy roads which have got a much lower speed limit. And I think reducing roads like that to 30 or 40 km to really, you know, try and promote a step change in attitudes.
Thank you. 10 minutes is up, but I just want to say thank you, and just your point, especially of the trails, will be taken on board. The 5 Towns Trail Master Plan is due to come out soon, and there'll be all sorts of opportunities to incorporate what you're talking about, because the trails won't be built straight away, so there'll be opportunities to use roads as well. So look forward to hearing your feedback on that. Yeah.
Well, I'll try.
Yeah. But thank you very much. It's very much appreciated, especially coming along in person. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Well, I hope I'm the first of many people to come and put their contribution.
Got a full day.
We've got a very full day.
Alright.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Roger, come up, please. So again, thank you very much for coming along, especially coming along verbally, and thank you very much for your submission. So you've got 10 minutes, and please allow a couple of minutes for questions. So we'll give you an indication when 8 minutes is there, and we can ask some questions. But the floor is yours. Thank you.
You might notice me glancing up there. I'm glad I've got a clock.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I didn't realise that I was going to be preceded by a cyclist. And in fact, he put his finger on something which I was going to sound out. There's often things that make a difference with something are the things that are less glamorous in reducing the speed limits you mentioned. But anyway, I'll go on about my submission. I think you're probably going to find mine a bit different from most of them, because everyone here is going to be asking for changing the draft long-term plan, but I'm actually asking for you to fulfil a commitment which was made in December 2016, but was never done. Now, I don't want to go into why it wasn't done. That was a footpath retrofit programme. I'll talk about bike trails as well. I think they're good. I'm not against bike trails, and just you never actually did. The one and only proposed new spending in the Walking and Cycling Strategy 2016 was meant to be put in the last long-term plan, and it was never done. So I don't want to say about why. One thing I will point out, it's rather different. If you look in the fine print of the draft long-term plan, you'll see there is a budget amount for, I think this year's 140,000 on footpaths, risings or something. That's business as usual, with all due respect. That is asset management, looking after the existing footpath assets. What I'm suggesting is, if you want business as usual, you wouldn't need a walking cycling strategy. I'm suggesting you basically, I did quite a bit of work, and it's all been done, it's all been actioned. comparing what best practice guidance says we should have and what is actually on the ground, as historically walking has been massively neglected compared to cycling, but it doesn't get the excitement that cycling does, and so that's one of the reasons. So if you look at what you should have compared to what you actually have on the ground, there's a massive discrepancy, far more than will be funded from the roads. So what I'm suggesting is you pick a figure, fund that, we've got strictly prioritisation, only do the most important stuff, and that will probably end up the town centre because, and that will dovetail beautifully with the town centre upgrade, and then lobby government for special funding because they have neglected cycling walking over the years. But one other issue, I think part of the problem is that the walking cycling advisory group was meant to be driving implementation, bringing people like transport agencies, the regional council, the road safety council, and I notice in this trimester it's people interested in walking and cycling are possibly councillors. Now, it was never meant to be an ideas forum. If you look in Appendix 2, you can see what the cycling advisory, walking and cycling advisory group was meant to be. It's not meant to be people with a passion for walking and cycling, it's meant to be the agencies which will actually implement the strategy. So part of the problem, I think, is that it's gone on to, bike trails are great, they excite the imagination, footpaths are far more important. But we talk a bit about bike trails. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against bike trails by any means. They can be really good, and the Central Otago Road Trail is the classic example in New Zealand. There's a few overseas as well, but Central Otago, take that as an example, that's got ample width, gentle gradients, gentle curves, good visibility. In other words, you can get a really good quality trail. Now, if you don't get the really good quality, you're not going to draw people from far and wide. It'll be nice to have, but you won't, have people coming from all over the country or even overseas. That's my concern. It needs to be really good, or it's not going to be the massive benefit and economic boost that I think you're hoping it will be. The other thing I think you're doing, and this is, I only put my credentials in Appendix 1 to point, not to crow, but to point out that there actually is a whole professional field here that you do need professional skill. Developing a local cycle network is completely different from trail planning. You've got different kinds of cyclists. One is bringing people from far and wide to an iconic tourist thing. The other is more local movements. And I'm just a bit concerned you mixing the two. There is actually a network plan in the strategy that I wrote, and a lot of it is about improving the connections by foot and cycle, and making it easier to walk and cycle than it is to drive. So in 2011, following the strategy I did then, we did actually build a couple of paths which give walkers and cyclists an advantage you don't have by car. That's the thing that will really make the difference, and as the guy was saying previously, things like reducing speed limits. They're the less glamorous things, and it's often a long game. So I'm also a bit concerned that you're going rather hastily for the rates funding for bike trails. I think the three options are spend some money, spend a bit more money, or withdraw. You're a bit too premature to say withdraw. There must be lots of other government money. Now, I thought of this after I wrote this, so I didn't mention it. But if you rebrand the Five Towns Trail as a local wire-wrapper cyclist alternative to the state highway, I would think you've got a case for going for state highway funding, which is 100% NZTA. I don't know what NZTA would think of that, but I think that's a case you can make. So I think there are other sources of funding you can go for. So for instance, don't withdraw from the projects, but I just think it's a bit premature to go on the rates. I think that's pretty well it. But just one thing I would say in conclusion, it's the reason, well I think I've already said this a bit, but the reason walking is massively neglected compared to cycling is that it doesn't get people passionate. It's too pedestrian. So do the decent thing, fulfills the commitment that was made in the last meeting.
Thank you, Roger.
So I've got some hopefully more than 2 minutes for questions.
Yes.
Just over 3.
Yep. So questions?
Roger, I've got just not really questions. I'm quite the cynic as well. So a couple of points that you made in 3.73 and up to 3.75 are concerning. So we're going to be deliberating tomorrow, so I'm sure we can all have a look at those. Also that important agencies haven't been included in your point 5.8. So I think there's some serious issues that you've raised here that will become part of our discussion. So thank you for highlighting those.
So you question what I'm saying or subjecting, or just reiterating?
Yeah, just that it'll create some good discussion. So thank you.
Roger, I've got a question. The Wellington Regional Trails Framework document, you're aware of that?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. How do you perceive that document?
Is that because I've not been working for council since 2019, has that come out since then? Or is that
No, it was done about 3 or 4 years ago, yeah.
Well, very positive, yeah, I'm all in favour.
Okay.
The only question I've got is, I mean, the 5 Towns Trail was a good principle, the vision of making 5 viable towns. Like I said just now, the main thing is if you can do it well, it could be a magnet.
Yeah.
My question is that you probably can't do it well. That's my concern. I've actually asked to Jen asked for the plans, and if I think they're good, I'll be the first person praising them.
So the 5 Towns Master Plan, which is in draft form at the moment, is aligned to that Wellington Regional Trails Framework, and is also the consulting company that's doing it is the same company that did that, and a lot of those issues that you talked about will be part of that plan. So and it's not expected that councils will fund trails. However, we will put a bit of seed funding in, and obviously the network will be funded through lots of different mechanisms. But other questions, guys?
Yeah. I don't know if I could just say, I think often the devil is in the detail.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not against this.
Yeah, great. Questions?
I'd just like to say thanks, Roger, for such a comprehensive submission. Really good, and I enjoyed reading it. There is a lot of discussion that we need to take out of your submission and really seriously consider it. So yeah, I'd just say thanks very much for the effort.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate your background that you have in this field and the work that you've done for council in the past, and also what you continue to do for a while. So, thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Thanks.
Thank you. Tom, looking forward. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming along. Thank you, and especially coming along to verbally submit. It's very much appreciated. So we've read your submission, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say on it. So we're allowing about 10 minutes for submission, but if you can allow a couple of those minutes for questions, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'll let you know when that's open.
Yeah. So the floor is yours.
All right, thanks. So yeah, my proposed submission, or my submission that I was proposing was that if the council yard was relocated, which I gather is one of the 3 things you discussed, that and the new car park was developed, that it would become accessible through the park, so that the parking for the Carterton Park would get increased. That would involve moving the tennis courts, relocating the tennis club, which is a cost, but I think the overall benefit would be big for the town. It would link up. I think Holloway Street is in the event centre. That's probably the Carrington Park is probably the 2 biggest assets that get used by the public and visitors, and if you can link them both up, you find that it would actually transform Carrington Park and Holloway Street. So my proposal would be that if the council yard was to move, that you create a similar car park to the one that's at Carrington Park, you have parking either side, access into the back of that event centre, and then it would just go straight through, the whole width of it would go straight through to the park, and it would be all open, so you just look right through to the park from Hollow Street. It would just appear to be part of the park. And you could, you know, over time those spaces could be developed. However, you know, the proposed pump track at Carrington School could come down into that space. I think that would be a safer option for the kids. Anybody that wants to use it. At the moment, my son might go to the skate park, loves the skate park, but won't go there, doesn't feel safe. And I think if you put it down in the trees, which the pump track is essentially an asphalt skate park, really is, more scooters on it than bikes. And you put it down in those back trees, my son would never go down there. The kids that hang out down there, and you can imagine it in the backfield under those trees. You'd be like, no thanks, I'm hanging out there. So I think bringing, you know, creating that space and bringing that, those sorts of assets or developments that could happen or might, you know, be in the pipeline into that space would be safer, and it will just be used by more people. Keeping that existing tennis, the public tennis court there, you know, multi-use spaces with more age groups using it, older, younger, make it safer for everybody, instead of separating those groups out. I feel, you know, put all the kids down the far end or whatever, you know, it just makes it, I think, less safe. And yeah, I mean, it's more interesting, I think, for everybody to be mixing. But yeah, that's my proposal, is that if that development did go ahead, that would be a consideration that should be made. You know, and there is extra costs to the tennis club. But I mean, however that needs to be approached, it needs to be considered. Yeah, I think it would transform the town actually, the park and Holloway Street.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Great vision. Other questions?
Can you just explain how you envisioned the car park going through? Were you suggesting that it goes right through to the other car park? So you drive right through?
Yeah, I was. Well, that would be a possibility. Yeah, that you could actually link the two up, with a wouldn't be a permanent access way, but it could be opened up on days, you know, event days. So you know, that was a hard surface all the way through there. So it just kind of half mooned all the way around to the existing one. You know, you could, wouldn't have to be hard surface, but it would make it accessible for everybody if it was a hard surface, that space, you know. But yeah, it would definitely be good to have, you know, vehicle access at that point, and then, it would, you know, if you imagine it was a hard surface, it'd be like a boulevard, you know, like that you could kind of set up those big little festivals, could come right into that space, you know, fill up that car park around it, into Hollow Street, and you just create this kind of, this link with it all. So that, I mean, I guess the way to do that would be to just look at it in a staged process, you know, and then you can, you know, it's not this huge, expensive project that you're looking to undertake all at once. It would be a, you know, we do this part first, and then that part, second, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then you feel like it you know, maybe is achievable. I guess all these things come together.
Did you envisage all the tennis courts going, or just?
Well, that public one is quite well used, just that one that is the netball court.
Yes.
And I mean, it's really nice to have those, and I mean, that's kind of off to the side anyways, in a way. If you look at the council yard, you know, the council yard runs down there, and you know, so it is quite nice to leave those, you know, those spaces that are open to the public, you know. But the tennis club itself, or it's either that or it's the, is it the croquet court, which was the second. One of those two things need to be relocated. Whether you relocate them into that nursery space, whether there's room there, I don't know. need to plot that. The club rooms would probably need to move as well, but maybe not, I don't know. And then, or they go to the rugby club or Howard Park. But I mean, I know they're open to it.
Thank you.
Discuss it.
Other questions, guys?
I was just going to say, I love big picture thinking outside the square as well, so thank you for kind of opening our eyes, looking a little bit wider of things that could happen in the future.
I'm sure it's been spoken of before, but I just thought to reiterate it. It's something that I really see would be quite, it would make a big change to how the park's used. Creating extra parking too. I mean, that car park's just chock-a-block some days. You can't find a parking, you're pulling in off the main road and it's quite, curious. So creating, it would be a similar sized car park essentially, that could be used for the event centre when the event centre is busy, or High Street, and it could be used for carrying parking, cars busy.
Have you thought about possibly linking up with the current Carterton School car park instead of relocating tennis courts or anything?
Yeah, you could do that. You could move it over that way a little bit. It just feels like, and that could be something that could be considered. If you do choose to transform that into a car park, you need to consider, that if that's an option. It feels like it wants to go just straight down the side of the courthouse and sort of into that, which is the tennis club. But you could try to, I mean, that's an option. It's like I say, I just think at the time when that comes to, if that decision gets made to relocate and the time comes to develop that car park, consideration should be made to opening up the park at that point. I really, a full width, not just a little kind of, turnstile entrance, that's 2 metres wide. Really make it like a big opening that you can just look at. Really just bring the park this way. Bring it in so that you really get that sense that it's there. It's not a little tucked away entrance.
Steve, yeah.
Tom, just looking forwards, if the eastern growth does go ahead, me personally, it would be great to see that Carrington Park connect with another green space over the back, backing onto Rutland Road. So just when you're thinking about bringing everything forwards, I like to, if you can envisage that connecting up there, so the bump track or whatever could actually be down there, if looking forwards.
If that opens up at that end, yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't have the full picture, so I understand that. And so I guess you're right. If that end opens up, then you have a similar space, don't you? Down that end, we just it becomes more accessible to everybody. So it becomes a lot safer. But I just feel that. All those considerations. I think the park and High Street's the greatest asset. So I think that it will be really good to link the two up.
I'd just say thank you, Tom. I think you've given us a vision now, and also while the opportunities there might arise for a car park there to incorporate that vision is something we're seriously worth considering. So thank you for putting a vision in all our heads. Really appreciate you coming along, and thank you for what you do in the community as well.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. So talking of what you do in the community, Ron, would you like to come forward? As you know, Ron's got a history of making things happen in the town, so thank you again for your submission and also coming along to speak to it, Ron. We've all read the submission and it's laid out very clearly, so the floor is yours, 10 minutes, and if you can allow us a couple of minutes of that for questions would be great. So go ahead, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Councillors and officers. Okay, well, I'll try and stick to the point. I
stood against amalgamation, as you know, and the result of that is now in front of me. We actually have our own council in Carterton, and it's staffed with people who actually have Carterton's best interest in mind. So it's great to be here and to be able to submit to a Carterton council, not to a Wairarapa council. The big jar of ideas, one of the best ideas I've seen in consultation ever. Commendable effort by the council, by the staff and communications people. So great work. The LTP refers to having to go forward without knowing what central government has planned for Three Waters and all the other things that they've got on their plate at the moment. That's a commendable approach as well. You have to remember you've got to hold these people accountable though. They will snip through stuff under urgency and we'll suddenly find that we have Three Waters being handled by a corporation in Wellington and with very little for the council to do. The documents, both the full LTP document and the consultation document, I'm sorry I have to say this, but this criticism comes from a support for the council, but there were far too many typos in it. They shouldn't have been released with the number of typos that were in those documents. In terms of the key issues for consultation, town centre car parking, I conditionally support option B, subject to two things. A peer review of the costing of that work, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and that the work is done in such a way that it doesn't preclude the use of that land for a higher value use, like the hotel that has been mooted in the past. 5 Town Trails project, I conditionally support option A. Option A is a risk management approach, and I like that. Dip our toes in the water, spend a little bit of money on it, and then, if it works, move forward. I also have issues around the costing code, which I think needs to be addressed. And the town centre redevelopment, again, I conditionally support option B, subject to a peer review of the costing assumptions. I think it's undercooked. So in terms of project scoping, costing and project control, as council, as a governance body, you face some issues here. The clock tower went 100% over budget. And when that was proposed to be done back in the day, I actually opposed spending $270,000 on it, on a piece of brutalist architecture. We've now spent $500,000 and it actually looks worse than it did when the work started. It's a bland, boring structure that really offers little, if anything. Wastewater treatment plant, Mike Ashby tells us we're $4 million over budget. I don't know whether that number's correct, but that represents $1,000 per head for every person that's going to be using that plant. That's pretty substantial. And the costing of the car parking and the town centre redevelopment appear to be undercooked as well. And I think as a council and the staff need to do better on this. Project management, project scoping, project costing are well understood disciplines. And quite honestly, the clock tower demonstrates that those disciplines are not being applied. So you need to do more work there. Water. So the contamination episode with the mystery E. coli, that needs to be reviewed. It needs to be an expansive review, and it needs to be independent, and it needs to be public. We need to see the council take this on the chin and find what happened and why. Now, I'm thinking that because of the random nature of the contamination, you may not be able to ever find the why, but I think we need to demonstrate to ratepayers that this contamination episode has been treated seriously. One of the things that I used to say, and I can't say anymore, is that Carterton had the track record of water provision that the other councils didn't have. We don't have that now. We've been shown to be in the same bucket as them. And it becomes very hard to resist Nanaia Mahuta's approach to take all water off us and get it done by some corporation in Wellington. The distributed storage issue that was considered by Wilkie Consultants, to be blunt, that report was laughable. It was prepared by transport experts looking at water engineering. To be honest, not up to standard. New provision of water. The document suggests that in 10 years' time, we'll be looking at new provision, or over the next 10 years. The trouble is, we've eaten up 3 years of that time. And so what is actually being done about new water provision? And if it's going to be Wairarapa Water, the dam at Wakamoka, then that's a whole issue again. We must ensure, you must ensure, that Carterton District Council is not the underwriter of last resort for that scheme. It's going to produce water that's very expensive. And it's disturbing to learn that you're proposing to lend them $400,000 on commercial terms, quote unquote. What commercial terms can you take from an organisation that sole ability is to spend money that has no assets? You cannot secure that loan. There'll be nothing to secure it against. When you come knocking on the door to be repaid, if the thing collapses, we'll be whistling for $400,000. Because it's such a risky loan, you need, if you're going to do it, I don't think you should put a decent interest rate on it. Housing. The LTP mentions affordable housing. Carterton District Council must tread carefully in affordable housing. Rates are the wrong mechanism to provide social housing. You end up taking from one ratepayer to accommodate someone else when that ratepayer may have an asset, a house, and pay rates on it, but might be otherwise poor. And so to raise rates to use to provide housing is a regressive tax that falls heavily on poor people. And often those people, their only asset is a house. But because they've got a house, they get paid for rates. Someone renting only pays their rates indirectly through the rent.
That's 8 minutes.
Yeah, do you want to take questions, Ron, or do you want to
And
any other points? Yeah.
if you do Carterton East, the extension, then that'll do everything you need to do for affordable housing.
Thank you. Very poignant points and precise, so thank you. Questions, councillors?
Ron, I'll just, the wastewater treatment plant, there will be a report on the audit and risk made available for the audit and risk meeting next week, so enjoy reading when that becomes available.
Questions? Yeah.
Ron, regarding the Wilkie report, there's quite a strong sense from submissions that water tanks are a good idea, and I don't disagree with that. Given that councils do things at scale, so putting storage within the reticulated network makes sense, and then you've got storage at an individual ratepayer level, what are your thoughts on the balance or how that might be implemented across a town? Which bits would be ratepayer funded, which bits should be individually funded?
Oh, I don't see the ratepayers paying for distributed storage. I see the council providing the means to enable people to do it. So I've got distributed storage. I live in Frederick Street. I have reticulated water, which apart from this recent E. coli incident is good water. But I also maintain a supply of roof tank water that I use for watering the garden and such like. So I'm doing that. I did it myself. And the main reason I did it was actually disaster preparation. That when the water system is down after an earthquake, and it'll be down for some time, let's face it, I won't have to worry about water. I'll still have to boil the stuff because it's got bird shit in it, but I'll still have thousands of litres of water.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I was going to say, how many thousand have you put in?
So far 1,000, and along the side of the garage there's provision for trimming that.
With small tanks?
Yeah, small 800 litre tanks, one at a time.
Okay, 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ron, very much. Very much appreciated, and just to also follow what Steve said, there'll be toward a risk meeting, there's also a full report on the clock tower and also on the OLE Colo. Yep. So thank you as always, much appreciated. So next up is Michael Hewson. Michael's not here. So, Ron, would you like to come forward? Ron, yeah. Me? You'd like to come up now? Yeah, thank you. So it's good to see you here, Ron. Thank you for coming along. Yep, thank you for your comprehensive submission, and also it's great to have you here in person as well. And just to acknowledge, as with everyone else, we've got 10 minutes, but if you allow a couple of minutes of that for questions would be great, if you want to take questions. Yeah.
So I'll start with an apology. Firstly, Chris is headed back home because I jumped out of the car and realised I'd left my sling behind, and I'm having a few problems right now. So if I I believe it's because good pain. But anyway, I couldn't, and it is a bit weird to be on this side of the table for the first time ever. And that it isn't the reason I'm here, it's because I believe it is important. Look,
we could wait for your sling comes if you like, Ron. Or...
No, I think I don't want to see you still carrying Chris, but just bear with Chris and a few bowls and draw this out to my ear. It's stupid and put sling on me. But look, I know you've got my submission, and I have no doubt you've read all of your submissions completely and thoroughly, and so you're in tune word with word with what we've all said. Cheers. No, not quite. But I just wish, I'll just make clear that I did make a typo in my rush, and I think it's in, I do not believe it. Yeah, you probably picked that up. Okay, where I said I do not believe it. Okay, so just point that out to you. Look, I don't mean to be a naysayer and a negative Nelly. But I felt there's a need to justify why I have said no, and Chris and I believe no to all three of your proposals. And I think it really comes down to a simple thing. One of the most ambitious ventures that this council has earmarked, I think that I can recall in time, is the expansion into the east and the subdivision creation of 1,000 new sections. If we look at that in context of the challenges that you're facing, in particular with infrastructure, and some of the fires that are burning around the district, which we all hear about all the time from different corners of the electorate or the CDC constituency, you have a number of issues on your hand. They are all infrastructure related. Now is not the time to be investing in nice to haves, and I have to say that as strongly as I possibly can. Your core business, and it's probably been highlighted by the Minister's comments of late, and to be honest, government comment, regardless of its label of national governments, for the last 10, 12 years. Some of us in this room staved off the wrong shores of the world who fought for amalgamation. And we crossed swords on those battles. I didn't fight for it. No, we fought it. I fought for it. I fought against it. Sorry. And so did I. Yeah, sorry, I apologise. But some of us, we fought against people who were pro-amalgamation. And the big argument was that Carterton could not sustain itself in the long run. Now, we won that battle, and we were determined and adamant that with competent and good management, the people elected by the council could oversee a good, strong management team and conduct Carterton's affairs going forward. Government has consistently, and LGC in particular, has consistently said that's not the case, and consistently predicted that small councils like Carterton will disappear because they simply won't be able to keep up the infrastructural commitments going forward, the costs of doing that. The way I see some of these projects, and particularly the Broadway development of $8 million, and particularly the new council building, bearing in mind there might not be a Carterton District Council within 5 years, is that that's not your priority. The walkway, I was the guy who fought for you to get that money. $1 million on that bridge. I was the guy who sat with Grant Robertson and sat with Shane Jones and sat with the cabinet and argued, not just at the cabinet table but in their offices, around that $1 million for the bridge. But right now, looking at where we are, the water reticulation issues, the water storage issues, I agree with Ron 100%. The reason we have tanks and the reason we're going to put in more tanks on our property is because we can't rely on, well, we're not on town supply anyway. But it's about resilience and it's about disaster and it's about earthquakes and it's about all those things and what happens if the water is cut off and how long does it take to get up and running. Within the township, that's even more important because you've got thousands of people dependent upon you. And we don't need to go into the problems when people start drinking water out of drains and pulling it out in bottles out of streams. Those are your big issues. Water reticulation, wastewater management. Now there's enough out there when you talk to civil contractors around the country who all talk within their family network. Chris worked for civil contractors for a number of years. I know a lot of them because they tendered for my projects, which are all underway now at Hakia. So chatter goes around. It doesn't necessarily come from your council table, it doesn't necessarily come from your council staff that you fired, it doesn't necessarily come from other people. It's chatter around, and everybody says this project's in trouble. Everybody says the projected costs are not the real costs. Everybody says that your projected, Carterton, you guys, your rates are going to get a kick, just like Marston did when their project blew out to from 25 mil to 60 mil. When Kuiper happened, Carterton, warning flag is in the same ballpark. I don't know what it is. I'd love to know. I'd love to have known months ago because I've been driving up and down that road seeing nothing happening for months and months and months and not one peep out of it. To explain why. That's your priority. Water reticulation, wastewater management and roading. And at Hope Road, we have a problem which has been exacerbated by not just this council's term, the previous and in my term, and before my term, in Gary McPhee's time. There have been many subdivisions created up the Hope Road. And we have a new set of subdivisions. With every new subdivision, there's more and more contractors up there from narrow, windy, thin road, which kids walk to get the school bus on. And we had a near miss. In fact, you nearly lost 2 councillors. I took them up there in Jill's car, and a truck came screaming down that corner and just about took us out. Why? It's a valley. We know wind. At worst we get 148 k's an hour wind through there. At best we get 0. When we get whiteout, the dust cloud sits there for a whole day, it doesn't move. When you get a whiteout and you come around the corner and there's a big truck staring down at you, you swerve to go off the road, but you don't know where the road is. And that's what nearly happened to us. The number of near misses is unrecorded, but they're happening every day. Unsealed roads, whether it's Hope Road, and I know it's a bit of a problem to some because the former mayor lives up there, and there's some people who think that that would be a bad look to seal a road just because the former mayor is not doing it for that. In your long-term plan has to be some decisions around sealing of roads, whether it's Paul's Road, whether it's Hope Road, whether it's Road Flat Point, wherever. But that must surely be based on criteria that's established by you, the council, and given to them to enact. Number of cars per whatever, number of subdivisions, projecting forward, what does it look like? Since we've been there, the number of properties is almost doubled. No, it's more than doubled. We've since learned that there are other developments we didn't know about. The question is, what's it going to look like up Hope Road in 2 years' time?
It's 8 minutes.
Thank you. In 5 years' time, and given this plan, 10 years' time. What is the actual criteria for sealing roads? What is your trigger pull that we all might know and we all might live with? No one wants special treatment, but what they want is consistency and policy based on factual, actual reality.
Okay.
And it might just seem to be questions.
Yeah, questions. Questions, councillors?
I have one on the number of traffic movement cars per day going up the road. What would that be?
We don't know. The last time that I can recall those meters being put across Hope Road was when I was the mayor. And that wasn't my doing, that was JP. The other thing about Hope Road you need to know is that for whatever reason, and we will say since JP left, because that's the guy we knew, The monitoring of the contractor's performance on that road has been appalling. That's why it's gone through the base. That's why it's now on clay. And your costs of rehabilitating that road back to a normal gravel road surface are going to be astronomical. That is unhelpful. And when we are up the valley there, when we're talking about sealing, we're talking about about a shift in policy where you lever developers who are seeking to profiteer a contribution towards that sealer. And I know this is part of your long-term plans, part of the next step into reviewing the district plan. We would seriously ask that in the district plan you review what development contributions should be. We point to Tiffin Hill. Why was Tiffin Hill treated that way and nowhere else, if that is the case? We point to Flat Point. You know, under common rights, John Booth's, my time, we found a very inexpensive solution to the problem at Flat Point.
I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Yeah. So is there one final question? No.
What was the solution you were going to mention, sorry?
Discussions with Fulton Hogan, they scour the roads before they're resealed, and when they scour the roads they collect up all that asphalt and they stockpile it. What they did is they took that stockpiled asphalt out to Flat Point, they rolled and reset the road, the top course, and then they lay it out, heated and rolled that asphalt, second-hand asphalt, recycled it basically, and sealed it. And we had a lady who was dying of cancer, dust going through her home. It was exasperating the situation. All the tenant residents up there were upset. We had, council staff and followed the process and approved those subdivisions without thinking about the consequences. And these consequences sometimes are not insignificant. They're not just a nuisance, but I'll leave that to John Keating, Dr. John Keating, to talk to.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. As always, thank you for coming along. And,
Thank you very much.
We will be going through your points.
And for the record, Mr. Mayor, Your Worship, I appreciate the catch-up we had the other day, and I might take that on that offer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Now, Michael.
So just sit in the middle chair, I take it?
Yeah. So Michael, thank you very much for your submission. We've gone through all of them, and we're well aware of your one, and thank you for doing that, and also thank you for coming along today to speak to it. So we're allowing 10 minutes, but if you can allow some of that 10 minutes for questioning, so we'll give an indication whether we're at 8 minutes, and if stop earlier if you like, and we can be interactive and ask questions. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how much time we'll take, probably not too much, but I thought, so I don't know, I guess everyone knows me, Michael Hewison, so I live just out of town in the rural area, and I work in Wairarapa as a civil structural engineer, and I have a project management background as well. So I guess the first thing I'd like to touch on is before we get on to it, is last week there was a by-election, and we sat down to fill in our forms on Tuesday night, and then realised, oh bugger, if you haven't put in the post by Tuesday, you need to hand it in. So I came in here first thing Wednesday morning, which was about 20 to 10 on the morning, and went through signing, dust my hands down, and then said, where's the ballot box? And, sorry, it's out in the room out the back, give them to me, and I'll put it in there. And I thought, well, that seems a little bit so I guess that leads to the risk thing that I just heard Ron talking about, which was on my list as well, that I would have thought that box should be available all of the time and not some of the time and out in the back room, that a staff member on reception took my things, tidied them up and then set them on a desk and said I'll put it in there later on. So I'm assuming they went in there later on, but I don't know that, so I'll just say that. So I was going to talk a little bit about risk projects and rates and money. So yeah, I guess starting off with the risk, well, we know that the CE leaves very soon. I know that there isn't a corporate services manager, and the community services managers just handed in their notice as well. So suddenly the whole top echelon of the council is decimated, and there's no historical knowledge on it, or no one to carry on with things, and there are these big projects out there that are not humming along. It would be nice if they would, but they appear not to be. So I just put that flag up that part of my studies was engineering risk management, and I see those as things that are extremely important to council to recognise and say, well, hang on, we need to have a careful look at this and choose whoever the new employees are with sort of care on what their attributes are and the skill sets that you need. And you just heard Ron talk about infrastructure. Well, clearly that's a big one. So that's one of my things. Projects, well, yeah, I get on to that. So the clock tower is something that I sort of watched over a long period of time, and I did work out that it would appear that the original estimate was about less than 300,000. It then went to 550,000, and clearly, like everyone else, I've heard the rumours that it's probably not that number, it's wherever it is. So if it was a one-off thing, well, you could sort of say, oh, bugger. But then if we go to the sewer plant, and like everyone, and you just heard from Ron, I drive past it regularly, everyone drives past it. Anyone that you talk to, whether they're from Carterton or anywhere else, wants to know what's going on, and I say, well, look, I really don't know. But it would seem that the overall procurement process of how you structure projects and how you put them together has clearly got some systematic problems with it. There's this systemic failure there somehow or other. So I have put projects together, multi-million-dollar complex engineering projects. These are major terminal upgrades, brand new seaboard storage terminals. So they have all of the attributes that you would have from your normal projects, but they also have another one, and that's that you're dealing with often a live terminal, so you've got a hazardous product there, which might want to burn at any time, and you're doing hot work. So you have to manage all of those sorts of things. Now, I've been able to bring those projects in on time, on spec, and on budget. Not killing main people, as my boss used to tell me, or wreck stuff. So I know it can be done. Clock tower, of course, not a great big project. The oxidation ponds are a bigger earthworks project. So I've had chance to talk to geotech engineers about other things and this liquefaction problem that's been identified by GW, which is a bit of a sham. And so I found out that there was a potential liquefaction problem where the sewer plant is, but your consultants, I know you're aware of it now, but in the early days I don't think they found it. So projects that I was involved in, there was always a huge front end to it, and that front end was deemed that 90% of the work was done before you turned a bit of dirt, and the last 10% was turning the dirt and building the widget or the gadget or whatever it is. So in that front end you identified sort of the initial, a big picture of what the design might be, what your requirements might be of what performance you might want out of it. And then you slowly work through a process of refining the design, refining the budgets, and getting to the point where your budget might be at the plus or minus 10%. That's the budget that you would use when you went into tender. So you had a pretty good idea of where it would be. And then if there were issues, there was a change management control process that also put the project back through the loop to analyse the whole sort of the technical content of it as well as the financial content of it. So my head is clearly telling me, with my background and experience and knowledge, that those sorts of things either haven't happened or they haven't happened well, and now we're in the position where they're, again, Ron's talked about contractors chatter, and they do. So if I give you the example of the oil industry, the marketers, because of price control reasons, weren't typically allowed to be seen talking to the marketers from another company, but the engineers would talk to the other engineers and the other oil companies and to the contractors, and you knew what everyone was doing. So that stuff just leaks out like a sieve, and you can't believe that you'll keep a lid on it, say, because you won't. So on that basis, I think there should have been more knowledge put out in the community so that people know what's going on, why it's going on. Now, I anticipate that some of that might be sort of a bit confidential, in that if there's some legal issues because the contractor's got problems with his cost versus contract cost versus estimate costs and those sorts of things. But people just don't know, and that's pretty bad. And then you're asking them to make decisions on things where they have incomplete information. There are methods and models that you can use to do that, but in this case I would have thought that that information should be able to be more readily available. Rates and money, and I guess just hearing Ron, I wasn't going to talk about roads, but I did drive. I live on Marshall Road, and I drove up that this morning to come here. So yeah, the current contractor. So when Oldfields or Higgins used to do that, maintain that road, it's a little Garrel road. They would grade it out as wide as they could. The current one ranges it in as narrow as they can. And I buggered if I know how he did it, but the last time they graded corrugations into the road for at least 200 metres up the road. They must have worked extremely hard to do that. It really pisses me off. But there are 3 mud patches in that road right in front of my property, my boundary, and there's another one just up the road from that I know that they're already roughing up and potholing out. So I know that in the winter time they're going to turn real bad news because they're bad now.
It's 8 minutes. It's 8 minutes.
Is it? Oh, shit.
Yeah, I mean, would you like to carry on, or would you want to take questions?
Yeah. So, okay. So, quickly on the 3 things, well, yeah, town centre, public spaces, access, well, I think that is a good thing to be focusing on because there's the new little units in where the vet was, so that's good. 5 Towns Trails Trust, well, yeah, I used to cycle in my university days and even in my work days in Palmerston North, so I know a lot of people want to do that, but I think with the rates increase and everything and the project management process, I would want to see the handbrake go on some of this stuff until we know that where the financial position truly lies and that there is a robust process of being able to handle projects in a timely and efficient, cost-effective manner. Car parking, well, it's certainly needed. My 91-year-old mother who doesn't drive gets brought here for things and it's a bit of a pain for her to park. But again, I project management / cost / that stuff I want sorted out before that happens. I noticed the rates, I'll just rattle them off, predicting 5.65 for the next year, then 2.3, then 3.9 and 5.4. It just seemed coincidental that it's been front-loaded and well, I should say that there was a predicted 1 million increase in the rates take for this year, which was 7.09%, so rounded down and then averaged out. But it seems funny that the smallest rate increase, I think, which is probably going to fall in the election year, which seemed to me, I would have thought it could be averaged out a little bit more. I'm a member of the Waihingi Action Group, and tomorrow I've got another meeting with the Regional Council on the whole living plan for the Waihingi River. And there we have a fictitious person, Mrs. Smith, lives in East Street in Greydown, widowed, has her own house, her only means of income is the pension. And what would this mean for her? Does she understand what you're doing and how would the cost? So I think the costs need to be better averaged out.
Okay, and I know. Thank you. Yeah, that's sort of 10 minutes, unfortunately.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. But thank you very much. Very much for raising that, Michael. So we've got Ray Lilly and Bill Napier who aren't here. I'll just come in out.
We're ahead of time.
Yeah.
We're ahead of time, so we missed the first speaker.
So they are out there. That's all.
I just signed it.
Jerry, could you pop out and just...
Oh, ahead of
Oh, yeah, they come, yeah. Welcome, Bill and Ray. You're straight into the hot seat. How's that for timing, eh?
Oh, that's brilliant.
No mucking around.
No mucking around.
So, first of all, welcome, and thank you very much for your submission. We've been through the submissions, and thank you again for coming to verbally talk to us about it too. So we're allowing 10 minutes for submissions, but a couple of those minutes, a couple of minutes of that we would like to ask questions if that's possible. Yeah. But it's your call whether you want to use the 10 minutes to present or take questions.
No, that's brilliant, thank you. I think we'll be pretty quick, and if there's any questions, we'll be really good. Thank you for the opportunity to give a submission to you from the Wairarapa Dark Sky Association. And Ray, our secretary, is with me, and I'm with Napier, for those who don't know, and I'm the chairperson. So I take it that you will read your submission, which I know you will have, which is really good. So I just wanted to touch on a few things. And first of all, I really want to thank Carterton District Council for the support that you've given the project so far. It's been really amazing. And I know we've been in touch a few times, and we have got an update actually which we can leave you as to where things are at, but just particularly want to thank you for the work that's been done on the plan change, and that's getting pretty close to actually going to council, so that's really exciting. And for the work with the lighting inventory too, and especially for Tony, who has been really very helpful and done an amazing job. And I think if you look on the website, you can, on either Carterton's or South Wairarap's website, you can actually pinpoint all those lights and things, so it's already publicly available, so that's really cool. As I said, the plan change is getting really close, and really the other big thing that we've got to do is now do the lighting inventory. So all of those sites that have been identified for public lighting, now we have to do that at night and give the light, the brightness of the, I think it's the brightness, isn't it, right? The brightness of those lights, and they go into the all the data as well. So we've been now finally sourced a spectrometer, and a guy that has got all the knowledge to be able to steer us in the right direction to do it properly, so that's really good. So we're, as soon as we can touch base with him, we'll be getting started on that part of the work, and then that's really the basic, biggest thing yet to go. We have to notify the International Dark Sky Association that within 45 days of putting in the application, the next lot of applications can go in on the end of August. So that's what we're aiming for. So that's mid-July to have everything. We want everything done by mid-July. So we're just about there, which is really good. So so then we're doing a lot of work around relationships and things like that too. And on Friday night, Rob came along to an amazing meeting we had with, and I know Greg couldn't come, but it was a really amazing meeting that we had with Professor Rangi Matamua. and he is basically New Zealand's expert in Maori celestial things, everything. And he gave just an incredible presentation on Friday night, and we had representatives from iwi, hapu, marae, and even from as far afield as some of the guys from Ikarahuna, which was really cool. So the building of relationships with the Māori was amazing on Friday night, and Rob, I think you'd agree, it was pretty impressive. So, and therefore we can work with them and use the stuff that we've started now to build these stories as part of the project as well. So the next thing, as I said, we said in our submission, is after the reserve has been granted, then you have to do annual reports, which are on the 1st of October, and there's quite a few different categories that you have to meet. So as far as that goes, so you have to give them reports on the lighting, sky quality, outreach, conservation and research, funding, arts and culture, community and media relations, engagement with the IDA. So To do that, we really need some people on the ground who are making all those things happen and making sure that the measurements and things are up to date. So hence, we have put in there that we would need to probably employ a part-time coordinator for the program, because someone who can actually get there and do all the work would be still volunteers. And we thought there was two ways of doing it. You could either have a staff person from a part-time person from within the councils to run it, or Wairarapa Dark Sky Association would be happy to coordinate all that, but we might need some money to go towards it, and we've got an indicative budget there. So running some events and also the engagement, which could be split between the two councils, and when Masterton come in, which would be within probably about a year, 2 years, depending on how long all of their inventory takes, then we would be getting them to share the cost. We've also been in contact with Greater Wellington, and they can see very much closely at liaisons with what is happening and what they do around the environment, which is also really encouraging. So I think that's it in a nutshell, unless you want to say anything, Ray?
Greater Wellington are actually beginning to develop their own dark sky program as well. They acknowledge their reach into Wairarapa, of course, and the fact that it's within their planning program, they've got it included now. On top of that, they have a small staff group who are working on looking at the regional parks all becoming dark sky places or dark sky parks under their umbrella. The first of which they say likely will be in Wairarapa as a tester for the whole of the project they want to run. But they're looking at, I think it is 9 regional parks, which will then come within the dark sky park process as part of Greater Wellington. And we have indicated to them that A, will of course support that in whatever way we can, as well as that we said we want to be rather more ambitious and start to look at parts of the Wellington region itself as joining the dark sky development and movement. That got a very good response, very positive response from Darren and Adrian and the exec members who were there.
So so there's, and we did also say that there will be a cost to that as well. So they know that.
But equally, they also said that they were very interested to observe what happens when we start the next big chunk of work, which is Masterton itself, which for the IDA internationally is also an interesting experiment. They don't have, within the dark sky reserves currently in place around the world, I think 16 of them, they don't have lighthouses. We have 3, and they don't have an area or a settlement, a city as big as Masterton. Most of them are up to about 10,000 or so.
Questions? Should I take questions?
Yeah, please.
Questions, guys?
I guess an obvious question may be, are you guys looking for funding outside of councils as well?
Yeah, we've looked at it quite hard, and it's easy to do some projects, and so maybe the event stuff there probably you could actually get some outside funding for. It's harder to do like something for coordination, as most people know who are doing with anything with that. So if we had the ability to have someone who was basically making sure that coordination and all of the monitoring stuff was going on and all of that sort of thing, then we could probably do the event side of it and all of the other things that needs to be done, and growing public education and things. You could do those as a project, which would be much easier to get from outside funding, grants and things.
Okay, other questions?
I guess following on from that, you say at multiplication 8,000 to 10,000, what kind of dollars were you thinking for Carterton?
Oh, well basically Carterton, that's in the 10,000 per year, split between South Wairarapa, so about 5,000 probably, 5 to 6,000 for the year. for the coordinator, whereas the masterman is actually getting their part of the inventory and everything done for them, so they don't have to, yeah. So that's what
Just a question for me, the Warrabee Economic Development
Yeah.
Strategy as part of that network
Yes.
is the Dark Sky Reserve. I know
It is.
Alex is fronting that.
Yeah.
Do you see WEDS as an avenue maybe to coordinate this project?
Could do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff now coming out which is much more concerning, and that's why we've been talking to the regional council, is the environmental stuff. Even more than, well, not even more than, but the economic development stuff will flow on from all of that environment as well. So the environmental, things that are coming out around the world are getting more, and that's why we were so keen to talk to the regional council. But yeah, definitely WEDS, and just the flow and effect from once the reserve's in place, then I think you'll see that economic development stuff happening. I don't think, until that's there, you haven't got anything to sort of...
Okay, and just a final question, do you see that rather than just South Warwick and Carterton funding it, that Greater Wellington's going to be part of it too, that they're part of that, and Masterton as well?
Yeah, Masterton would be, if they want to be in, they will have to be part of the funding as well, so hopefully that will be, you might be a bit more work once you get to Masterton with it, but also, so I can't imagine that the Carterton and South Warwick share would be any more than what we've indicated in here, and it would be then, if you want to grow it, then those other two places would have to put some money towards it.
And Greater Wellington's already engaged with us and looking at a funding project now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on, and thanks for hitting the hot seat straight away.
Oh, no problem.
That's great.
Thanks.
Much appreciated.
Should I give these to?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much.
So we're slightly ahead of time because of the first speaker not being able to come. So what we'll do is we talked about at the start, and that's making a start and going through the written submissions. So if we start right at the beginning on submission number 1. So Rebecca, just want to reiterate the points that we were going to...
Yeah, so if there's any items that jump out at you, especially from the written comments, I think that's where most of it will come from. We either park them on our deliberations list that we need to make a decision on that item, or we park it on our action list because it doesn't relate expressly to the LTP. Or we can possibly incorporate it into operational programs. Yeah, so we'll start with number 1.
So John Hart, Tool.
Rates.
Rates.
Does it require a decision or action?
Correct.
Well, I guess it does depend on how many other people comes out now.
Yeah, so we note that. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
2.
And it's just allowing
Oh, yeah.
submission.
Okay, we'll wait for Helen. Okay, so we'll go to number 2 now. From Ray McGregor.
Council office, does that need to be
Yep,
put?
council office.
Pop that on the deliberation
Yep.
list. Yeah,
Yeah, good actually.
we may end up taking up the whole whiteboard, but
Yeah, we can use it.
yeah, just like that.
And maybe you also have a Carterton Historical Society because there's been a few submissions on that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, and the cycleways will be a deliberation point in itself, so you can just note that feedback.
And as you mentioned before, they've been summarised in the report.
Yeah.
But do take comments on them. Okay, so we'll just break from there, and we'd like to welcome Helen. It's good timing, Helen, thank you.
Thank you.
So, come and grab a chair if you like.
Right, thank you.
And just thank you very much for the work that you do in the community and the success you've been having. As you seem to get older, you seem to be having more and more success, and bring a whole lot of people along with you, which is fantastic. But just thank you for your submission, and thank you as well for coming along to present verbally. So what we're doing is we're setting aside 10 minutes, but if you can allow, say, at least 2 minutes of that to ask questions. So we'll give you a nod when it's 8 minutes is up, and but stop earlier if you like, and have questions. But
Thank
you look at very much at home there, so go ahead.
Yes. Thanks, Billy. And as I get older, I find there's more and more to do. And I meet more and more people who are willing to join, the activity. It's fantastic, meeting people at the farmers market and all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic, yeah. And we have just a wonderful community here. If you want to have an ambassador for Carterton, I'm your man.
Sure are.
I'll just begin with a note on climate change, and I'll read from this because it'll be quicker. So, as noted in my written submission, I consider the matter of climate change by far the most important issue facing Council and residents. I think the potential impact on climate should be considered by Council before proceeding with any proposals. Examples: the proposed resiting of the council yards, the replacement of the council chambers. There are others. And I suggest that if it isn't already happening, that council members make it a priority to familiarise themselves with the latest science of climate. So, and I suggest you refer to Christine Kernahan's submission. I think she says it all. So, for save time and repetition, if you would just look at her submission. With regard to parking, I strongly oppose the proposal to create a park in Holloway Street. Alternatives are well expressed by Marty Survivor. It's 139. You have a look at that. With the cycle trail, although I chose the Carterton to Greytown option in my written submission, I'm now concerned about safety issues in light of comments made by Roger Bolter earlier today and reported in today's Times Age. With housing, I support diverse section sizes, allowing for granny flats, tiny houses, larger sections to enable home-based food gardens and spaces for community gardens, etc. And I fully support the submission made by co-housing, number 189. With water, I'm strongly opposed to ratepayer money contributing to the proposed dam project, which is after all a private enterprise. The trend to adopt regenerative farming practices shows that water is best stored in the land, not applied artificially to the land. Ratepayer money should not be loaned for any purpose. We're not a bank. Refer to comments by Marty Survivor, 139. And with town redevelopment, I'd like to see a multi-purpose resource repair facility close to town. I think that this could help to limit our waste and involve employment for people and just be good housekeeping, good practice if we could. And that could be a multi-purpose facility involving, the men's shed and all kinds of repurposing activities, even the arts, for instance. So I'd love to see something really significant develop around that theme. So that ends my comments.
Well done, thank you. Very, very clear and precise. So that's great. So there's plenty of time for questions. So questions?
I've got one. I've asked a few times. I keep poking the dragon around the reuse, recycle, repurposing thing, just to gauge community desire for this, and I hear it a bit. What's your view on how it might be established? Do you think this needs to be bottom up from the community as an organic kind of approach, or do you think it needs to be top down where council would come in and spend a lot of money?
No, bottom up. Take the remakery and all that, the community things down in the Hutt Valley, take that as a model, but remember that we are a unique community, you know, that's a highly densely populated area, we're different, and we have different resources, different needs, but I think as a starting point that would be a model to look at.
The council is more of an advocacy and support role.
Yes, and getting out of the way, you know, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
So certainly what's planned with the town centre and how it's for the people and it's going to be connected physically and socially.
Yes.
What you talk about is a great opportunity. So as Robin and I are spearheading that work, I mean, if you could point us to a couple of leaders who would be prepared to lead that bottom-up approach, we can certainly.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, we could create those opportunities in the town centre.
Yes.
As small or as big as you like.
Yeah. Well, I'll put out my feelers. We've got the Living Economies conference this weekend, and so there are people with the future and resourcefulness and so forth in mind. Have you seen the program for the Living Economies conference? We've got some fantastic speakers there, and we're very excited about those people who are coming, and I think it's a feather in our cap for Carterton that this national good is taking place in Carterton. We're often in Auckland or Christchurch or Taupo or somewhere, and so and this came about because I have a working group now promoting a local currency for Carterton, and so Carterton was chosen because of that initiative, and so I'll keep an eye out for potential there.
Yeah, because if, like you say, it's best bottom up, and you just get someone to take that lead and be that star.
Yes.
I'm sure. Yeah, thank you. Other questions, guys? Okay.
Hi, Helen. You referred to Christine Kernahan regarding climate change. What about from your own perspective, what do you think we should be doing? You just mentioned that we're not doing nearly enough. What do you think we should be doing?
Well, in the long-term plan, I didn't get any sense of urgency or the scale of the challenge coming through there. And so, and that's why I wondered whether, I mean, I know you guys have degrees of stuff to read and all that sort of stuff, but I'm convinced that if you were to really take the latest science seriously, that would filter through into how you approach everything. So, yeah, I'd encourage that. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of good material out there. There's also the naysayers and so forth that, you know, don't be distracted, because I think the science is unequivocal. Yeah.
So are you suggesting that our role would be kind of support and advocacy, continuing to tell that story, as opposed to doing things?
I would say that you very carefully measure the potential impact on anything that council commits to as a high priority. Yeah.
So including it in sort of day-to-day business considerations.
That's right. I mean, you know, if you're thinking about shifting the yards, well, what impact will that have? Mm-hmm. And you know, there's various things to consider with regards to that, but you know, and I'm not at all in favour of that. Wasn't in the plan, but there's been talk of having this lovely hotel next door here. I don't think so. What I think we need to be planning for is catering for local needs first and foremost, not the tourists. We're entering a changing world, a vastly changing world, where people are not going to be skiving all over the place, certainly not from overseas. And you know, I think what we put in place over this 10-year period is going to be critical in terms of the well-being of not only our people, but our economy and environment. And so we've got to have that big picture, long distance view of what will life be like in 10 years' time.
One more question. You elaborated, so you indicated you were concerned about safety on cycle trails.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on what those safety
Well,
concerns were?
you heard Roger earlier today?
Yes.
Yes. And that was reported in the Times Age. And I don't know enough about it, but it just made me hesitate. Because I think we can't take risks with cycling, or with anything for that matter. And so we just need to make sure. I mean, he was saying, you know, about driveways coming out on Broadway and all that sort of thing. You know, it's the finer detail. And so while promoting cycling and walking is a great idea, we just need to be pretty careful about how we go about it. And I think that we just need to closer look.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. That's sort of 10 minutes, so I just want to say thank you very much. It's a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah, very much appreciated.
And thank you. And I just love the way you are so positive in your reports in the paper and your attitude and so forth. And you bring your council along with this positive attitude. And we're very, very lucky to have you as mayor and these councillors. And by the way, is Dale here?
He's joining us later in the morning. He had a
Right,
prior
right,
engagement, but
yes.
He's ready to hit the ground running. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So yes.
Thanks,
Very
Helen. That's
good.
very
Thank
kind.
you, Helen,
That's
that's
very
lovely.
cool.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Much appreciated. All right. So we will stop at 10:30. So we might as well just carry on through the written submissions. So we're up to number 3 now, which is Chris Miles.
Chris is also concerned about controlling rates and focusing on infrastructure over nice to haves. The two themes I took from Chris.
So you going, Rob, please?
The two themes I took from Chris were a concern around controlling rates and to achieve that, focusing on infrastructure ahead of nice to haves, i.e. cycleways.
Okay.
And council office.
Any other points, guys, you want to take out of that?
I mean, we can put rates on the deliberation list, because it will come up several times, and I think we should have a conversation around, yes, we think these are affordable, and we don't think they are affordable.
Okay, we'll note those. Okay, number 4.
Bypass.
Yes. The bypass is coming up.
Alan's actually going to come and speak to us, so maybe we should not talk about this one just yet.
Okay, yeah, good point. It does come up a lot.
See you, Roger. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming, Roger.
Right, Steve Dawn, number 5.
So that talks about the town centre, Northwest.
One point I get out of that is about, which I think is essential, is keeping the rural identity of our town as well as it goes forward. Any other points?
No, we don't lose that.
So the town centre.
Rather than out of because that's sort of how your.
That's
It is. No matter.
Horse riding trails.
shared services.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure what that was meant by that. As in more shared services or
Well,
less?
I was wondering if it was shared services with councils or shared services as in some of the health and
can do anything around that since we don't know, to be fair. And then incentivise homeowners on Main Street to increase their visual appeal. And then we can put that on our deliberations list.
So by incentivising homeowners, I wonder what they're wanting. Is that like reducing their rates, which then means that the other ratepayers have to pick up for them to be incentivised?
Yeah, well, there's lots of different ways, isn't there? I mean, the concept of the town centre, you know, it's going to rejuvenate. It's getting to buy into that vision and if need be. I suppose it's a pride-based thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also personal property. It's not really council.
Yeah, it's not really council's core
And
business.
when you think of a competition, sort of best garden, that kind of thing, I guess.
So deliberation list or action list?
Well, that would be more a community group would organise that.
Okay.
I think it's an LTP, so I think what she's asking for is some weird thing to LTP, which would probably financial policies. Yeah, incentivise property owners. So your first protocol in terms of what I took to read the submission was, you know, look at the levers that you've got to incentivise. And one of those would be some sort of rates relief or grant or whatever. But it's also another matter that you could do some other non-financial incentives. So I think my reading of that could disagree, but my reading of it actually is first up, think about it as an LTP issue.
Okay, do you want to agree with that?
Makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
It could be, you don't want to, but.
Yeah.
And more horse riding trails, does it need to go on our LTP action list too?
Deliberations, I mean.
Yep.
Deliberation.
Yes, sorry. Continuation of Park Road resurfacing.
That's kind of a business as usual
Yeah.
thing. It's happening. It won't be influenced by the LTP.
No. Should we just note that comment?
We can note it in our response,
Yes.
in our response to Steph.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to number 6, Stephen Pallister. In the summary of the key issues, consultation issues, we've summarised his points here, but just acknowledge his submission. Any comment?
It's just generally supported. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Tracy.
Okay, Tracy Higgins.
Wellmead Gorge Road. We can put gravel roads in our LTP deliberations because that will cover a lot of submissions. And maybe make a note specifically of Wellmead Gorge so we can discuss that.
It's good to have a specific list of roads that are mentioned in submissions, but also have generic talk of gravel roads.
I think we need to keep it general because, you know, as Jane pointed out at the beginning, that silent majority, you know, if we were to keep a list of just those roads that were brought up in the LTP, then we'd kind of lose that objectivity. We need to, whatever decision we make needs to be provided or applied equally across all gravel roads. I take Ron's comment earlier about what are those criteria and that's a job for us to figure out so that we can tell that story in a cohesive way that makes sense.
Agreed.
Good call. Yes, I'm sure there is one.
Okay, number 8, Daryl Rayner.
This is the rates again. I didn't understand his comment. We certainly don't need more visitors to the Wairarapa, especially as this past year the area has had the biggest benefit in the country from domestic tourism. I wasn't quite sure.
I think he's saying we don't need to.
We're already
Yeah.
attracting lots of visitors, so do we need to do anything to pull more people in?
That was the way I took it as
Okay,
well.
yeah. Roads again.
He's assuming that if when Transmission Gully and Sarah Road is finished, then they will maybe cut down traffic that will be interesting if that was.
Yeah, it will be interesting.
What impact that will make.
I think all these items we're going to cover under our main consultation items anyway.
Yes. Okay. Number 9, Martin Dench.
Can we park that on our action list to send
Yeah.
to the Trails Action Group and the master plan?
Yeah, I would, yeah,
Yes.
agreed.
Send that feedback here.
Any other comment on that? That's pretty straightforward.
Thank you for your idea.
Yep. Joy McDowell.
Positive about Eastern Growth. Yeah.
I don't think there's particular actions we need to take from that besides
No, I mean,
noting it.
the eastern growth and the plan changes and stuff, that's all happening as quickly as it could possibly happen.
Yes.
You want to put Eastern Grove area as a...
Yeah, I think so, and that, because that also feeds into the district plan review.
I guess it does impact on our proposed budgets for putting in the infrastructure for Eastern Grove, so yeah.
Yep. Donald Griffin, number 11.
Rates.
There's that perception about what you get for your rates as well, which is, I mean, a lot of what we're hearing, I'm getting the feeling that we need to, I guess, look into ourselves and see how are we telling the story, and are we telling it as well as we can tell it. Because some of the concerns that people raise are not because there's something actually wrong, it's just that they don't know or they're not aware of what is actually there.
So he's also asked for an extension of our
Yeah, yes please.
Okay.
That was that.
Comfortable with that one?
13 and 14 are just straightforward.
Yep, so John Reen, Robin Jane Reen and Anthony Reid. We've acknowledged those. Their key consultation issues have been factored in. Number 15, Vicky Waller.
Footpaths, that can go on our LTP list if it's not there already.
Yeah, it needs to be. London Montgomery.
Action list? Or is that LTP? It's not currently in our LTP.
It's tied in with the council building, police building,
That's right.
Home Manu Gardens, precinct, isn't it?
So it is, yes, we're going on that space, but yes. Yep, thank you, Jim. Diane Jack-Anderson. Noted. Joan Graham.
Footpaths and bottle stores fall under the district licensing.
So what she's advocating is, I heard this a couple of times during the campaign, was spend money on footpaths within the town before we start spending it on trails outside the town. I think is the point she's trying to make.
Yes.
There's not a lot we can do about the no more bottle stores.
Yeah.
Historical Society, again, we've got that up there, haven't we?
Jane Booth, 19.
Oh yeah, Historical Society again.
So another comment here around prioritising infrastructure over
Yep.
nice to haves, and support for the historical society.
at number 20, and then we'll break. Number 20, we acknowledged Jenny Ward on the key consultation items.
Right,
So we'll do 21. Yep. Acknowledge those key consultation items as well, and also the acknowledgement there as well. So we'll adjourn the meeting now until 11 o'clock. Okay. So thank you very much for the first session, and thank you those of you that are here.